Hey, Polly.
Hey Greg, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Today we have Saul Malek,
Oh,
our
yep,
certified gambling speaker, and from Saul Malek Speaks.
yep, yeah. We
So,
met him a few weeks ago.
yeah,
Yeah,
he did a great presentation to the coalition, and I thought it'd be great to have him on the podcast so
yeah. We
everyone can
don't hear
get
enough about underage gambling.
don't hear about it at all. However, it's every other ad I feel like on my social media platform. So yeah, so he's going to be giving us some insight on some areas that there's gambling ads and where we might be missing the boat on spotting gambling in our household. So
Great.
it'll be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear.
All right. So without further ado, joining us today on Totally Preventable, we have Saul Malek of Saul Malek Speaking, a pro speaker on gambling prevention. Saul, how are you doing today?
Doing awesome, Greg. It's nice to see you again, and thank you for having me on.
Oh, our pleasure. Our pleasure. Saul, to start us off like we normally do, can you just tell us a brief little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
So I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. That's where I'm calling in from. I'm
Mm.
27 years old, and I am in long-term recovery from gambling addiction. So my journey really started in college. I developed an addiction to gambling after being introduced to sports betting online as a sophomore in college. It really progressed and unraveled over the next 2 years to where I almost dropped out of school, had all sorts of consequences to it, but then did enter into recovery. I started speaking in 2022. At the end of that year, I went back to my high school in Houston, where I'm from, and just did a little assembly to raise some awareness about this issue because I had started to see gambling popping up all over the media. And from there, I had the idea to make inroads in being a prevention speaker on gambling. There's a lot on opioids, on alcohol, but hey, gambling is here to stay for young people. So I turned it into a business venture, made my own website, got all my media together. Long story short, for the last 2 years now, I've been speaking, um, touring schools, presenting to like prevention organizations, leading training, speaking at conferences, offering the perspective of the next generation of gambler, as well as what the recovery looks like for young people. So it's a very unique perspective and something that has been self-motivated as someone who knows what it's like to venture off into the depths of gambling.
Mm. Thank you for sharing.
I think we had the pleasure of speaking with you a couple months ago, and I certainly know gambling is an issue, but I went home, I have young adults, and asked them, like, are kids, young people gambling? Like, where do you even hear about it? Like, how do you know if, unless you're going to the casino? And as a 54-year-old woman, I am not on the websites and the streaming services and the channels or whatever that they are. And they're like, that's all you see is commercials for gambling. It's in your face everywhere you go.
Mhm.
So I think that is an awareness too, just because I'm not seeing the ads for it and the promotions for it doesn't mean that people aren't being targeted, right?
Right.
And that's where the issue is. So studies show that up to 6% of adolescents meet the criteria for a gambling problem, and another 10 to 14 are at risk. Numbers rivaling youth substance rates. How is this flying under the radar? And I think maybe I just gave a little bit of of a clue, but I think there's many other ways it's flying under.
Sure. Well, it's a good question. I mean, gambling addiction has always been known as the hidden addiction in the sense that you can't smell it coming off of someone, you can't see them stumbling around. So, in that sense, gambling has always been a bit of a hidden problem. But when you talk about what you had already introduced with the online access,
Mm.
and to backtrack on that just a little bit, I mean, there are legitimate entities out there that have age limits on accessing their sports book, and of course that is state dependent. The majority of states that have it legalized the age is 21. I want to say Rhode Island actually might be one of the states that has 18 as the sports betting age. Yeah, it's 18 years old in Rhode Island. So that, I mean, that's already part of it, at least where you are.
Mhm.
But when you talk about how it's not being detected, there's so many ways around those age restrictions. I mean, you can get set up with an older sibling or cousin or someone's parent who makes an account. Parents are giving out their information. And so if you have one kid who can access it, then the other kids are just going through that one kid to place their bets for them and they move the money. But the way I was doing it was through a bookie. Like someone created an account for me on a website that's not monitored, it's not regulated. You don't even need to have money really. You bet on a credit system and then you Venmo at the end of that. So, I mean, there are ways around it. But the other reason I would say it's flying under the radar is because I don't think the severity of it is really well understood by society still. And so I don't know that it's always undetected, even though that is a part of it, like you and I had just talked about, is that not always seeing it because it's easy to hide it, but also the fact that it's hiding in plain sight, I think, in a lot of instances, in that, you don't see it as a big deal when it's really the next step up from playing in a fantasy football league to just do a little sports betting. And
Mhm.
it's been marketed in such a deliberate way to where it just seems like a very social endeavor and not something that would rival the opioid crisis. So I think those are a couple reasons, is the access and then just the perception of it as well.
Mm. Now, these are huge words in my house. Video games, loot boxes, skins,
Mhm.
in-game currency. Now, research is saying that these mimic gambling mechanics. Are we raising the next generation of gamblers?
Greg, I think we are. I mean, let me take you back to my childhood. Me and my brother were twins. We were born in 1998. So our first real video gaming was like 2003.
Mm,
And that was when the GameCube was out. And so we had NFL Street on the GameCube. And now when me and my brother visit our parents' house, so this is over 20 years later,
mm,
we're still playing the same darn game. It's the same NFL Street, the same players. I mean, some of these guys aren't even alive anymore, and you can still use them in the game. There is no modded whatever. You can't get online and buy new packs of players. So all
mm,
that's to say that's the old generation. You buy a video game for $50, and that's the same game forever. But now, like you'd said, you put in money and you can upgrade your gun. You can get a rare skin. You can trade things in game. And even when you just describe what the process is like, put in money, open up a treasure chest that may or may not contain something of value, that sounds like gambling to me.
right.
And the fact that it's at such a young age, like you mentioned, like loot boxes in video, like video games are accessible to anyone, regardless of age. You have like Roblox or Minecraft, like kids are playing these sort of games, and so it is for sure frightening to think that, well, if you've been doing that since you were 11 years old, then how is it going to be a problem to play a slot machine? You've already been conditioned to do that. So those are some kind of scary things when you think about the video games of today.
Right.
Mhm. The National Council on Problem Gambling says that over 60% of teens have gambled in the last year.
Mm.
Do you think video games are playing a high part in that Gen Z being in the gambling scene, or do you think there's other reasons?
No, I mean, I think that's for sure a part of it, but just being on campuses myself, getting to present to high schools all around, I hear the whole variety of different gambling activities that are taking place. There are still traditional card games, especially at these like boarding schools where I've gone to present, where the kids just live there. It's essentially like being away at college. And so you have students that are able to play cards in between classes and I guess you could do that even in a day school environment. But all of that is to say there's so many different options when it comes to gambling, even for the underage, that I that number doesn't surprise me when you think of all the ways that gambling is taking place. And something that really stands out to me in talking to school administrators is that their goal is not to fully eradicate gambling. I mean, perhaps it is, but it's not the realistic goal. The realistic goal is if we can at least limit it to kids playing a little poker where we can see it and we know exactly what they're doing, at least then they're not online doing who knows what with like thousands of dollars. So I'd say there are levels to it, even within that 60%, because you say 60%, it jumps off the page, but then to think, okay, some of those are just little $5 whatever, which as someone who talks about this, yes, that's like the starting point. Yes, that is still something to take note of, but objectively less harmful than some of this other stuff that's really is out of control and has no sort of limit to it.
We're having a similar conversation around mocktails today. How
Hmm.
mocktails are a great alternative, but there has to be a conversation around it, like
Right. Right.
there has
That's
to
a
be a
good point.
full conversation around the addiction and the harm reduction or the reduced use and how addiction works, how some people can limit themselves and some people can't.
Right. Right.
Right. Right. I mean, that's a fair point, and that's something to try to address in the assemblies too, is okay, what's the difference between the social gambler and then who's the addicted gambler? What does that look like?
Right.
Is social media now the new casino floor for our young potential gamblers, our teens? And what role do you think that influencers are playing in this?
That's a great point. I mean, social media, I'd say, is a huge driver of gambling. And I say that because the way I've seen it, the loss in the gambling experience is just as marketable as the win. And I say that because you see posts, if you follow something like Bleacher Report and their betting platform or some of these other ones, they will post bets that lost at the last second that had like a crazy loss, or some better was one bet away on a large parlay ticket from winning thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so I'd say that the social media experience has transformed. It's not even about winning or losing. It's like this whole experience of getting to talk to people online, like people posting comments. Oh, I had this player at such and such odds and I almost won. Oh, you should have bet on this guy. They've encouraged such a dialogue about it. And then, not to mention, the streamers, the celebrity influencers. I know even Drake has
Mhm.
gotten really well known for the Drake curse. Like whoever he bets on, they lose, and that's a whole meme. And he's endorsed by Stake, and he will live stream himself playing roulette or casino games. And so, yeah, I'd say social media is absolutely big part of it too. Is that you have popular streamers and influencers who are promoting it. You have the whole environment of people socializing over it, and I know when I mention at schools, I say, oh, it's likely that there's a group chat out here in this audience called the Degenerate Gamblers or something. You
Mhm.
get a couple kids that look at each other and laugh, or they know, like, oh yeah, they were talking that same language. So it's it's really, I'd say, also, I'll say this too, change the mentality of being a degenerate, addicted gambler is something that is a sickness to something that's like a badge of honor. Like it's cool. We're I'm a degen. So social media has played a part in really transforming that messaging too.
Mm. DraftKings. I'm so glad Greg wrote these down for me because DraftKings, FanDuel, and other online platforms are booming, and not just with adults. With ads airing, like we were talking about before, on NBA games and memes flooding Instagram, are we witnessing normalization of gambling in our youth?
Oh, completely. I'd say it's very, very normalized. I mean, even looking at the numbers you already brought up of just how commonplace it is, but I'd say, I mean, if you just put yourself in the environment of watching a basketball game and think of yourself as a teenager, even, with a group of friends watching a game and everyone has money on it, it's like, shoot, you'd be stupid to not have money on it when that's like the main talking point of everyone hanging out and getting together and watching the game. So I'd say it's incredibly normalized, and it wasn't like that when I was gambling, shoot, 8 years ago, 7 years ago. It was not so widespread, but I'd say now if you go anywhere, you'll hear young people talking about gambling. So it's for sure pretty normal.
What happened to bragging rights?
No, I mean now it's all about, parlays and placing bets and things.
Well, I don't even understand that. But
Right.
why do you think gambling's not talked about or talked about as much as like vaping and underage drinking? What do you think that is?
I think a few reasons. I think the first thing is it's still pretty new.
Mm.
Well, I mean, gambling's been around since, people were betting on like dice blocks in Mesopotamia, but to gambling in the scope that it's been for young people is relatively new. The accessibility of it, the advertising of it is all relatively new. So I think part of it is just a matter of time. But there's also the perception too of, well, first with gambling, you could win or lose. And so there is the idea that, well, those who are addicted or those who have a problem are just bad at it. It's like if you're bad at basketball, it's not really a problem other than like you can improve at it. So people think we just improve at gambling. It's not an addiction. It's not a health problem. Gambling is something that you really like can't overdose on. So when you see all these overdose deaths out there, I think then there's a much more immediate concern, even though the rate of suicide with gambling is very high, very steep. They're strongly correlated, but that's not an immediate effect. You can put out a PSA that shows a person strung out in a hotel room or something, and I think that is much more of a immediate imagery, whereas gambling, it's like it's associated so much with money that it's like, okay, if you lose some money, not the end of the world. They don't see the emotion, they don't see the relationships impacted, they don't see the depths that the gambler and the family struggle as a result of the addiction. So I think it's the newness, it's the perception, it's the way again that it's been marketed to not seem so significant. And because so many people like to do it, I think that's the other thing is if you address gambling on your campus as an administrator, well, then you also are now kind of under the microscope for your own behavior. And now we can't do casino night. And like people like that stuff. People just inherently like gambling. So if you raise attention to it, I mean, and you stop it, then it's like people don't like that.
Right.
What are some signs parents can look for if they think their kid might be gambling?
Well, first you just have the more clear sign of the financial sign. So you see money leaving the account or a bunch of money coming in through Venmo, possessions being sold, pawned away to get money with which to gamble. And I mean that isn't always immediately visible, but I know for me, like money was leaving my account and I was able to excuse it to my parents, talking about how I owed dues or textbooks and things. So the money's a big one. But if you also look at just online behavior, I'd say parents nowadays have an obligation to do some monitoring of what their kid is doing online. And because so much gambling is transacted digitally, I think I would look at online habits and patterns as a parent as a sign of gambling. Like, are they spending time on whatever sports website or sports book, or who are they interacting with online? Who do they follow on Instagram? They follow all these streamers, betting platforms, things like that. So I would check on that. But I mean, there's also the emotional aspect to it as well. And gamblers become depressed, withdrawn, isolated. And of course you could say depression and isolation, or you could be a million things that isn't gambling, but at least include that on your list of things to look out for. I would say is some of those sort of behaviors. One other thing I'd add is I know there's a lot of research done out there about gambling and ADHD and impulsivity, the underdeveloped brain. I'd say parents that know that they have a child who is impulsive, risk taker, thrill seeker, I would think, hey, be mindful that maybe they would be at risk of having a problem with gambling.
I didn't think about that.
I have a secondary question. Just made me think. So we
Yeah.
do a program called Hidden in Plain Sight here, and we set up a kid's bedroom. and mock bedroom of things that parents could look for signs of. It's got signs of alcohol misuse, drug misuse, even some eating disorder signs. It's certainly not so parents go home and freak out and rip their kids' bedroom apart, but just so that they, if they see something, it might start a conversation. Any ideas to what we could physically add to that bedroom? Be a sign. You
Oh,
know,
for gambling.
for gambling, yeah. And I'm putting you on the spot, so I apologize. You
No, for sure. I mean, I would think you could even throw, well, if you're talking, because we already talked about some of the video games that started.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even think of put a computer there with like Roblox or something, or one of these games that has like a loot box. Because I think parents see it in plain sight. Oh, he's just or she is just playing a computer game or a video game.
yeah.
And they don't realize the gambling component of it. So I would maybe put that on like a video game or a computer screen.
Mhm.
I would have the
Card.
phone, the technology,
Yeah.
but then think of some other. I'm thinking of other stuff. You know, I go to Kroger here. Do you have Kroger in Rhode Island?
No, but it's a supermarket,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
grocery store.
yeah.
So I've seen they have they sell gift cards that can be used like specifically to DraftKings or FanDuel. So I'd
Okay.
maybe have some of these some like gift cards or something like, hey, they can buy access to it at the supermarket and maybe use someone else's ID or like a fake ID.
Yeah.
Trying to think what else. Well, the other thing that I mentioned that still takes place with betting with a bookie or something. So maybe I would have like a Venmo printout of different transactions, and this is the money being sent to the bookie. Oh, shoot. You know, that's something you wouldn't really know if you see all these Venmo payments. You wouldn't necessarily know they're paying someone for gambling. So,
Right.
so a few ideas. But then, of course, you had your traditional. If you had a deck of cards, I guess parents say, okay, I mean
Yeah.
that's pretty self-explanatory. But
Oh,
Yeah.
some great ideas.
They are
Great,
great.
great
yeah,
work. Yeah. Oh.
thanks.
Now, streamers, fantasy sports, fantasy investing, all types of different, even like crypto casinos. How deep does this gambling rabbit hole go?
Goes deep. I mean, it when you get into the weeds of things like crypto and the stock market, what is a little bit perplexing, and I think goes back to the other question about why it's not taken so seriously, is that I mean, investing done correctly, it's like a healthy part of a financial portfolio, I guess, so to speak. So there's kind of a blurry line, I'd say, in some of these activities, like the stock market, for instance. I know my parents are about the most responsible people I've known financially, and they have money in the stock market, but it's not in the same way that someone who's day trading some sort of meme stock and doing a bunch of trades, day trades, and all that, it's not the same thing. And so I'd say when you bring up things like the crypto market and the stock market, is that they have the potential to be completely misused and abused. And goes back to how some of these apps are gamified, like Robinhood in the stock market. It gamifies the experience. It'll give you some free bonuses or referral bonuses, you know, let you day trade. And they've transformed that experience.
Mhm. The DSM-5 classifies gambling disorder as having a behavioral health addiction, much like substance abuse. Yet schools really aren't addressing this issue. How can we help them? What can we do to help them get this message?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I mean that's my bread and butter. That's like literally right now, I guess my entire career is getting into the schools, getting into the youth groups, doing presentations that are connected from personal experience or more relatable to students. I would say than just pure statistical information. But as far as pointers go to actually get access to the schools, I would say my pers as a mental wellness conversation, mental health conversation, talk about some of the components of mental health that pertain to gambling and say, you know, if I get on a call with the school and I can prove to them that this is an issue mental health, and not just about money, and it's not even just about placing bets. It's about risk taking. It's about, escapism into the world of gambling, into this dream world. I think then they're more willing to have that conversation when they see that it hits on some of the other topics that they're already talking about. So, I mean, I've had some good success getting into the schools. I'm always working to book more of them, but I'd say that that approaching it from a more broad perspective allows me to have those conversations.
Mhm.
Now these ads, these gambling ads, are usually bright, fast paced, brilliant color schemes. Is this another Joe Camel?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. Have you looked at there's a professor who he's a lawyer actually. He went after the tobacco industry. His name's Richard Daynard. Have you heard of him?
Hmm. No, I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, okay. Well,
Probably should
he's a
be.
no, no, it's okay. I mean, he's a lawyer. He took on the tobacco industry, and now he's taking on the gambling industry. And he made that same reference about the Joe Camel and the cigarettes and the campaigns and how it's being marketed. So, I mean, I would say that currently the advertising is fairly unregulated, and
Mm.
it's perpetual, and it's all throughout social media channels and TV where young people are seeing it. So, I'm not a legal expert or anything, but I would think that before too long there will start to be some rules put in place on the gambling ads, because they're so frequent that they're even I thought SNL recently had a skit about sports betting and ads and stuff. And I mean, now the mainstream media is poking fun at just how preposterous it's like. You can't watch anything without another ad for a sports book.
Right. Right.
I'm, I am totally clear from ads from sports books. This is how boring I am. Like,
Really?
I don't know.
You
Yeah,
put
Oh, I mean, if
it's
you
fair now.
yeah,
I
not, yeah.
guess if you watch more sports programming. Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so what's the real difference between fantasy sports and gambling? And why do so many teens and parents believe it's so safe?
Well,
Full
fantasy
disclosure, we
sports.
had a fantasy sports league here, but it was for
Oh,
bragging rights. Bragging.
okay. Yeah.
That wasn't fantasy.
Oh, it wasn't?
No, it was
This is why I don't get
it was
betting
a
ads.
March March Madness bracket.
Oh, March Madness
Oh,
bracket. Oh,
okay,
okay.
sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean, they're similar things. I mean, the fantasy sports. So I'll take a little page out of the 12-step Gamblers Anonymous program. They say for the addicted compulsive gambler, they say fantasy sports is gambling and you don't participate. It's that same sort of rush, that same thing that you get from sports betting. There's a few differences I would say. I mean, in a traditional fantasy football league or fantasy baseball league, you draft a team for the entirety of the season, and you're making transactions that essentially you're the general manager of your own team. You draft players from all different teams across the sporting league, and then you're making trades with other members in the league to build a team, and you're competing against the other people in your league. And it's fine. I mean, some people don't even really check their team that much. They set their lineup once a week, and it's not a big deal. But I've found from participating in it, it can become an obsession to constantly be checking the team and setting the lineup. And I have to watch all sorts of random games that I wouldn't otherwise care about because my player is on that team. So even if it's for money or not for money, and say it has a lot of the same structure as betting on a sports game where you're checking for a certain outcome and you're waiting for something to happen and you're anticipating and you're kind of getting that rush when your guy hits a home run or when your team wins. And so it's different in the sense you're not betting on each game, but you're still getting some of that same rush from it. So I'd say people can do it in a safe way, and there are people who don't check but once or twice a week. But again, it's like a slippery line into becoming an obsession or something more than it should be. And then people also will put in money on their league, which I'd say is a bet. If you put in $100 at the end of the year, you win your league. Or if you ever seen people do fantasy football punishments where you stand in the middle of an intersection in your underwear with a shaved head because you lost your fantasy football league. I mean, stuff like that.
I remember the only times when they were enjoyable. When I was doing fantasy football was when it was just a family fun thing. But I do remember being asked from different friends and other relatives who were in outside leagues, and they'd lead off with the pot. They like, yeah, it's a $1,500 pot if you win. And it's like, wow, okay, wait, if I can just pick my team, I can do it. And like,
Yeah,
oh, yeah, yeah. And then the rush of being, having first pick, and and that's even a lottery about it. So yeah, I can see how it can get pretty bad. Um,
sure.
do you think more therapists should be screening for gambling?
Hmm.
Yeah, I think without a question. I think also pediatricians who ask their patients about their sexual activity, about their alcohol intake, ask about their gambling
Mm,
behavior. I would think maybe not like a 3-year-old, but you also wouldn't really ask a 3-year-old about those other things either. I don't think,
right.
unless I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that like for the age that it's appropriate to start asking those things, I would include gambling.
Okay.
Hmm.
And I think I would want to clearly define what that is
Mm,
too in that intake, because there are people who say, well, poker is a skill based game. I don't see that as gambling. I don't see sports betting as gambling. It's an investment. So I would make it clear gambling, including, games such as poker, slots, sports betting, whatever. Sorry, I just dropped a spoon there somewhere, but I don't know if you picked up on that, but yeah, I would screen for that for sure.
Now I'm hungry. No.
Yeah,
Um, how are policy and lawmakers doing with all this gambling? Are they up to date? Are they falling behind? What's going on?
No, I know there's another professor who speaks about gambling advocacy, and he is pushing to introduce something called the Safe Bet Act. So he's trying to start putting in legislation about the advertising and about things like that for player protection. As far as I know, right now, there's not any sort of like federal regulation to a large degree on advertising or anything. I know that there was a something called the Grit Act. It's like a gambling treatment act that took percentage of like tax revenue from the gambling industry to go back into treatment and research. But beyond that, I don't know that there's really a lot of legislation out there.
Mm.
now I could be biased, but um, if I think of a gambler, or if I put into an image generator, give me a photo of a gambler, I think 99.9% of the time I'm going to come up with a male man. Are
Right.
girls gambling? Is this something that we're not talking about?
They are, and it is still primarily a male problem. But I was reading an article from, I believe it was FanDuel, that talked about their increase in signups from women who are starting to bet on their platform. And I was just at a school in the Boston area speaking, and after the fact, I had a conversation with some of the students with the counseling staff, and a young man said, "Yeah, there are plenty of girls who will sign up, or they'll place some bets on someone's account or something." So I'd say it's still primarily a male issue, but it's becoming less so. But it is, that still that public perception, I would think. And I mentioned it. I did a TED talk that I'm still waiting to get the footage on, but I made the point that when you picture gambling, you picture the OTB, the off track betting, the horse track, the old timer with the cigar and the racing form and all that. So say we're kind of phasing out of that traditional old school looking gambler.
Mhm. If you had an audience full of parents in front of you, what would you want to convey to them about youth gambling?
I think if I had an audience of parents in front of me right now, I'd want to convey to them that this is a family problem, that this is something that goes beyond financial, that if you're a parent and your child becomes addicted to gambling, that it will place severe strains on your relationship, and could cause irreparable damage just with all the lying that goes into gambling. We didn't really talk a ton about it because we had a lot of good other content today, but say more than just the finances, the lying, the loss of trust that comes with being compulsively gambling is a huge deal for families. So I would tell parents, this affects you as well. So be mindful of that.
Thank you. So this has been great and full of information. I'm sure our listeners and viewers are going to be very, very on board with all this information and definitely taking a bigger look into gambling and if it's in their household. So thank you so much for your time.
And
Yeah, of course. Sure.
if people want to learn more about you or people want to contact you for a speaking engagement, how can they do that?
Sure. Thank you so much. So if you go through my website, it's just my name, saulmalek.com. There's a form there where you can inquire, ask for more information, look to schedule a presentation or a speaking engagement. So that's right there on my website.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for all this great information, Saul. It was a pleasure seeing you again.
Yeah, it was great to see you. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Have a great rest of your day, so.
You too. All right.